So when you add up the aggregate disruption across a dozen technologies moving this quickly, the best way we found of framing this is what we call the 4Ds. Digitize, disrupt, demonetize, democratize. And so let me cover each one of those very quickly. The first is very obvious, right? We're digitizing the world incredibly rapidly. Our memories aren't in our heads anymore, they're in our smartphones. All our relationships are now digital because of social media as opposed to analog. 10 years ago, we had maybe 500 million internet-connected devices out in the world. We're up today to about 20 billion. Ericsson made this graph predicting that we'll be at 50 billion by the end of the decade. But pretty quickly after that, because we're doubling every year, we'll go from 50 to 100 to 200 to 400 to a trillion. Okay? Think of that one statistic. We're 20 billion today, going to a trillion in a few years. We think we're 30, 40 years into the information revolution. On this metric, we're at 1% or 2%. We're just starting. Right? So most of this disruption is ahead of us as opposed to behind us. And now we're digitizing all sorts of crazy areas of our life. The company Beyond Verbal out of Israel can take 10 seconds of your voice, and just by analyzing the variation in the tone, they can assess your mood and your attitude to an 85% accuracy. So now we can just digitize emotion and detect it using just the tone of your voice. And so this kind of starts to see how fast and how pervasive this pattern is. And I mentioned already the Tesla example, where a car is now really an app in a sense. Now, when you digitize something, we found this becomes very, very disruptive. And that's the second D. And the best way we found of framing that is photography. Some of you are old enough to remember film photography. You're operating from a scarcity model. Right? You can only take so many clicks, you can only carry so much film. Each click costs you like $1 for processing the photograph. When you move to digital photography and you information enable the fundamental substrate, three really, really important things happen. First, marginal cost goes to zero. Right? Now you can take 1,000 photographs, the cost stays the same. As a result, the domain completely explodes. In film photography, I'm very carefully clicking here, I'm very carefully clicking there. But today we're basically holding the button down on all of our devices and taking billions of times more photographs. The third thing that happens is very subtle, but really important from a business perspective, is that you shift the problem space. So what do I mean by that? In a scarcity problem space, I may sell very expensive cameras. I may offer courses on photography. I may publish books on composition to help people optimize for that scarcity. Right? And I can create business models around that. But in an abundance problem space, we all have 8 copies of our photographs on 10 devices, and you can't find anything. And so you've gone from a scarcity model to an abundance model, a sourcing model to a filtering problem. Nobody in the world can make money anymore selling very expensive cameras or courses on photography. We now have different models like Instagram and others to filter a lot of photographs using social techniques or algorithms and other ways. And so when you have this transformation, the incumbents are often trapped in a material scarcity-based world, and the world is moving very, very quickly. Now, this transition is happening across all of these technologies, and you saw that earlier. But technology after technology is going through the stack and going from a scarcity to an abundance model. Technology does that. Technology takes something that is scarce and it makes it abundant, whether it's photography or music or transportation or whatever. Okay? Now, we are seeing, as I said, this transformation in all of these areas. We've just never seen this before. This is a very unique point in time. In robotics, those $20 helicopters that you play with on Amazon and throw away were used to cost $800, and now they're $20. Okay, and so this is a fundamental pattern that we see across all of these. And as I mentioned, solar is maybe the most fundamental paradigm shift that we'll see. But autonomous cars will change the landscape pretty completely also. But we've worked out that once you have about a 20% penetration of autonomous cars, we'll see the existing capacity of roads and highways increase by about 10 to 15 times. So that'll totally change the car landscape in a fundamental way. And so between these technologies and the underlying disruption, we see very fundamental change happening across all of these ways. In the next segment, I'll talk about the broader impacts for society as we roll this paradigm out.